We've got about 5 minutes, so we'll wait till we'll start right on the dot to respect everybody's time who has kindly decided to participate with us, and our speakers who kindly decided to participate their expertise on this town hall, this public service for our members in the community. And so we'll give it a few more minutes and then we'll get started on time.
Shazam.
Shazam is right.
How many people are we going to have on this session here today?
I think we have something like just under 40 registered.
Cool. Can I get a copy of the recording?
My mute turned off.
Can I get a copy of the recording?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to post it on our website. And just so you know, Kelly, we started doing this as a public service to not just our members, but the community back when this entire pandemic happened in March. And we were doing them weekly, and we were bringing kind of like local experts on how to deal with either the PPP program or the government funding. So,
Right.
you know, to navigate our members and the business community through this process. So they started weekly, and now that we're starting to slowly open up here in Colorado Springs, we decided to go ahead and go to like still doing this monthly, once a month, and then transitioning. How do we transition and still having our healthcare partners on the call to kind of give us an update what the status is moving forward. And then I think the most important thing is people like yourself. I think we just had Mary Kelly on last week, which God love Mary Kelly. She was giving, kind of helping people how do you position and pivot during this time frame for business, and shared some great practices. And you're on, and I think Meredith's coming on next month. So just kind of sharing all that stuff, and then broadcasting your programming and any special stuff that you guys got going on as well.
That's fantastic. No, we appreciate the exposure, and we've all had to figure out so quickly how to make this all work for everybody, not the technical part, but I mean, just like how our business has changed. And so I think the ability for people to see that, we can do a very good webcast. I mean, because not everybody can. It's extremely hard to just look at the green light for an hour and pretend it's a person, and I mean, it's just a totally different energy. And I've just heard horror stories of bad presenters. I had a client tell me the other day that they had a woman who was in New York, and let's face it, we all know that apartments in New York are very small. It's just the way it is. And she was very polished, and she had her home background like I do in the background, and you could see her kitchen, and apparently her kitchen was tidy, but the entire sink was full of dirty dishes. And it's like, that's just the stuff you don't want. And or another client was telling me that they had a presenter who is so distracted by their own image, right? Because we can see ourselves, and it's very hard not to look at that or to look at you. And that they ended up just like looking down at their image the whole time, or looking at their notes. And it's like, nobody wants to look at the top of your head. You have to learn to look at the camera, no matter how uncomfortable that is. And so just, we appreciate the opportunity to show people what we can do.
Well, that's great. Don't judge me. This is my first time doing this, Kelly. So I'll tell you what.
Look at the green light.
Look at the green light. Well, Tamara Moore is our programs director, and she handles all of our programs. And she actually helped the chamber pivot all of us to this virtual plateau. So she actually is the host, and she runs it, everything. And unfortunately, today she had a meeting that she had to be with the city and the county on some major projects here during this time. because she consults with other businesses here in town
Yeah.
and the government as well. So she says, Lola, can you handle the, I says, oh my God, the slides, the this, the that. I think I'm gonna have to call on Tiffany because Tiffany does everything behind the scenes for me. So between Tiffany and Julie, they've been really great on putting things together. So I think I could do the basic talking and introduce you guys, and then you guys can take it from there.
Yeah.
So great.
I am.
Well, good. I think
following
it's,
the
we should get started here.
Yep.
So welcome everybody. My name is Lola Wallach. I'm the President and CEO of the Southern Colorado Women's Chamber. We have been doing these town halls. We started doing these when the pandemic happened. We've been doing them weekly, and now we have transitioned since business is starting to open up. We have transitioned to a monthly platform, and we're really excited to continue as we transition and business opens up to still bring in some keynote speakers on different topics that are still at the front of mind. And of course, healthcare and what's happening during this time. We still want to get information on that. And then we also want to have speakers that come in and tell us how do we adapt to our new norm. And so we are so excited to have some great experts here that I want to introduce to you today. And, you know, we have actually three speakers. We're going to start with introducing Stacy Creel from Penrose St. Francis Insure Healthcare, and she's on with Bill as well. They'll be talking about Dr. Bill, and they'll be talking about all of the things that are happening right now with the pandemic and how the healthcare system is handling those issues, as well as what they see on the horizon. So they'll be our first set of speakers. And then after that, we will then introduce our next speaker, which is Kelly McDonald. She has been our accolades presenting speaker for 2019, amazing international speaker, and hopefully she will have some really good insight for all of us as well. But without further ado, let me introduce Stacy. She is a board member of the Southern Colorado Women's Chamber of Commerce, and we're excited to have Stacy on the board of directors. Stacy, take it away.
All right. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Bill Plouffe. He is our Chief Medical Officer here at Penrose St. Francis, and I would say the county's expert in COVID. So what we would like to do today is talk a little bit about what's going on globally within our state, and then also narrowing it down to our community here in El Paso County. So if you want to go ahead and start our coronavirus report. All right, next slide. All right, so what's this kind of slide? We pretty much post this every day for the most part here at Penrose St. Francis, so all of our staff know what's going on within our community. And here you can see in Colorado, you know, how many tests that we've performed, the cases that are positive. Now this again is a statewide. How many people have been hospitalized in our state, and the deaths. And then in El Paso County. And what you can see on the graph over here that's in blue, there's an arrow there where it's El Paso County, you know, the sixth largest county. I mean, we're the second largest county in the state, but you can see where we're ranking as far as our number of deaths by our county. So I'm thinking that is pretty dang good that we have a low death rate compared to some other larger counties.
And just one other point on that, when the whole pandemic first struck El Paso County, we're all aware of the bridge tournament. And so there was a time that our death rate was the highest, or the number of deaths was the highest in Colorado, just because our most vulnerable part of our population got hit first. But subsequently we've been doing very, very well. And because of the quick response from public health, we're quickly able to get people to isolate, follow the right precautions, track down different cases, and it's really made a huge difference. So.
Yeah, and what most of you probably, if you watched the news last night, you know, one of the patients that was from the Bridge Club was actually discharged home last night from one of our facilities, and we think that was just awesome. So, yeah. All right, next slide.
And the next thing with this slide just shows the rate per 100,000. You see El Paso County way off to the right side. So all the measures that we took in place early, the collaboration amongst the public health county or public health department under Dr. Robin Johnson's lead, collaboration with the mayor, who's been very proactive, as well as with UC Health. We were able to really move the dial and really almost right out of the gate, flatten the curve for our community. Next slide. And here, what you see, and all these slides are from the Colorado Department of Health, and I do recommend looking at their website. But you see in the left upper corner, the number of cases has started to taper off. And I'll speak a little more to that because I think we'll see that change a little bit. Excuse me. And then the cumulative cases in the upper right-hand corner, you see that that has leveled off over time. And then also that correlates with the number of hospitalizations has also leveled off. And fortunately, and we were delighted to see that the number of deaths across Colorado has already hit its peak. And across our health system, we do have regular communication with all the other hospitals in our health system. All have seen a decline in the number of cases within Colorado. And the next slide. And then here's just a breakdown of who has acquired coronavirus. And even though a lot of the discussions in public health and elsewhere has been focused on those who are most vulnerable to get very sick from it, everyone can get this. And so you can see every age group is represented. But on the far right, when you look at those over 70, particularly those over 80, they don't tolerate it well at all and have had a very high mortality rate and required hospitalization. There's also been a lot of discussion across the nation that even though men and women can get coronavirus equally, men have fared worse. And then we also, just sharing the breakdown by ethnicity and race, because that's been a lot of the discussion and concerns across the country as well. Next slide. And then this is just another way of looking at the different counties. So we're the fourth line down. You see El Paso County really had its peak April 13th and has seen a relatively steady decline over time ever since. And across the county with UC Health as well as with Centura, we opened up and started doing more time-sensitive surgeries. And from that perspective, we've done well. We haven't seen any increase in cases. We haven't seen any decline in our supply of personal protective equipment and have not been stressed in regards to bed capacity or ICU or ventilators. So we've been doing very well. And other slides will talk specifically about the hospital. So next one. This slide, I think, is important just to point out how to interpret data that we'll see in the coming weeks. When this first hit Colorado, all of our testing was done out of the Colorado Department of Health. And then after that, LabCorp and some other private companies got involved. But the queue for testing was really long. So even for those people who are admitted to the hospital, it was taking anywhere from 12 to 14 days to get that test result back. That makes it very hard, one to treat. Well, we would treat them just fine, but we still had to treat them with all the maximal precautions and everything else, which made it very difficult. And it also meant that we needed to keep the testing focused on the hospitals and those patients who are admitted to the hospital. And so the rate of positive test in the very beginning, which is the line graph that you see going up in the beginning, would be expected to be high because we were only testing the sickest of the sick. But now that we've got increased testing capability, we're testing people out in the community much more. People just show up in clinics, people discharged from the emergency department, And so what we will see is a lot more positive tests, so to see more cases being reported, but it doesn't mean that we're doing any worse as a county. All it means is that we're getting a better picture of what is already existing in the community. And that is also reflected in the line graph coming down, because as we're testing people out in the community, we're seeing that the rate of positivity and the prevalence in our community is very small. And one thing that we're doing for anyone having the surgery at the hospital is we're testing them in advance. We're making sure that they haven't had any symptoms that be concerning, such as fever, cough, shortness of breath for 10 days prior to their surgery. And then we're also testing them a couple of days prior to surgery. And we've done close to 800 tests, and I believe we've had just one positive test. So the prevalence in our community is very low, which should be very reassuring. The other graph on the right is just to share that the serology test. Everyone is really counting on the serology test to be a game changer, and it has the potential to do that, but a lot of the tests out there really aren't ready for prime time. Now the tests here and the results shown here show just how many of the tests are negative, and that may reflect that we just have low prevalence in the community, but we also think that the sensitivity of some of the current testing in the state really aren't ready for prime time, and so we're not recommending using those. I think the serology test will be coming very soon as they're being improved across the country. Next slide. And then the last thing, we just wanted to share our experience at Penrose St. Francis, and when we saw the most patients that we had. And so it was really the last week of March that most patients were testing positive, and we saw most people coming into the hospital. Because people with coronavirus tend to be quite sick, they tend to stay in the hospital for a while. So the peak capacity or peak census of patients was really the first week of April, but it never really pushed our capacity at all. And throughout this, because we weren't doing other surgeries, things that we could put off temporarily, we actually had 4 floors in our hospitals completely closed. And we at max probably used about half our ventilators, and we had many more that we could rely on. And then our daily discussions with UC Health, they were seeing more patients than we were, but they also had a lot of built-in capacity. And then we had alternative plans that we could flex that capacity as needed. So overall, we did really quite well. And I believe that is the last slide that we had. You want to add anything else?
No, well,
Great.
I think we're good. We'll wait for the Q&As.
Yeah, we'll do the Q&A after we now get a chance to hear from Kelly McDonald. Kelly McDonald, international speaker extraordinaire. You're up. Oh, we got to get you off mute, Kelly.
Oh, sorry. Hang on one second. Yep, hang on.
We'll let you drive.
Yeah.
You're
I'm
good.
not
You're
muted.
unmuted. You're good.
Oh, I was gonna say I'm good. Okay, so thank you. Let me just do this. I wanted to talk. Is that all good? Let's see.
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah. Let me just share my screen though. There we go. Is that good? Can you see how you can help and serve customers now?
Looks like a McDonald's ad.
Can you see that headline there, how you can help and serve customers now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure everybody's on board. Okay, so what I just wanted to talk about was just to spend a few moments on a few do's and don'ts for doing business in a time like this. So, you know, you're the Southern Colorado Women's Chamber. The chamber consists of all different kinds of businesses, and every business has been absolutely slammed by this virus and the pandemic, and it's literally turned our worlds upside down. And one of the things that I'm finding with a lot of clients is they're like, I literally have no idea how to proceed. I don't know what would be considered the right thing to do, or if it's tone deaf or insensitive. So I just wanted to walk through a few do's and don'ts with some examples. So from caring for your customers and how you can serve them right now, the first thing that you have to do is acknowledge what is happening. There was a study that was done in April that said 77% of consumers want brands to only speak about their products or services in ways that show that they are aware of the crisis and the impact on people's lives. And if you don't, I think you really risk coming across as very clueless or insensitive. So I wanted to give you a few examples of this in terms of totally tone deaf marketing. So the day that we were asked to, start sheltering in place in Colorado, this is an email that I got in my email box, and it's for Sandals Resorts, and that's an all-inclusive resort, and it shows this, attractive couple, frolicking on the beach somewhere. Well, number one, we're not going anywhere. We're not traveling. Number two, I'm not going to frolic on a beach. I'm in lockdown. And and I know that this was an email campaign that was locked and loaded and probably months ago and set to, go off on, whatever it was, March 2nd. But my point is, it's an email campaign. An email campaign can be started or stopped on a dime. So there was no reason for this to go out. They just weren't thinking like, oh, gee, what's our email marketing campaign? And the next day, here's one that I got from White House Black Market. And this one really killed me because it was the subject line in the email was the it dress you need now. Well, if I'm not going anywhere, I don't think I need a new dress, and I don't think I need the it dress of the season. So not only is this campaign completely tone deaf in its actual product that it's selling, but here's the kicker. At the top, it says, we're closed. So it just killed me that it's like, they actually thought enough to modify their email campaign to put that banner on there about where our boutiques are closed, but they didn't think maybe we should just not do this. So completely tone deaf marketing. You see examples of this all over. And then one of the things that did help, that was a good thing, was as all of us were learning about what coronavirus etiquette meant, some major brands really started to amplify the message and really show the importance of this. So to your point, Lola, about McDonald's, McDonald's has never modified their logo ever, ever. They've never changed it or, they've never modified it. And for the first time ever, they separated the golden arches to communicate social distancing for us. Burger King modified their logo by fading the K and the G back so that the message is burger in. They're clearly letting people know that they're open for business, but you can't eat your burger there. You have to take it home and burger in. Audi has always had the conjoined circles, and they separated the circles along with modifying their tagline for keep distance. And Nike, which has for decades carried their major Just Do It campaign, changed it to Just Don't Do It. And I was very moved by the following ad that I'm going to show you. I almost think Nike can do no wrong when it comes to marketing. They just always get it right. And this is one that moved me very significantly. And it is, if you've ever dreamed of playing for millions around the world, now is your chance. Play inside, play for the world. So another key question that any kind of business has to ask is, and it sounds harsh, but it does have to be asked, is do you have a reason to be here? Because while all businesses have been impacted by the coronavirus, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's an urgency for every kind of product or service. So here's an example, beer. Bars are closed, restaurants are closed, everybody's home. So if you're a beer manufacturer, what are you gonna do? Say, be sure and pick up a 12-pack and then go home and drink it. I mean, like nobody, it sounds kind of pathetic. And there's a clear need for a voice from a company if there's immediate assistance or if in any way it can alleviate current concerns. But that voice becomes less necessary if it's just buy my stuff. And then on top of that, it doesn't really make sense for something like beer right now. The thing is, beer is sort of a happy product. People associate it with socializing and being with friends. And it doesn't really have that same cachet when you think about just dragging a 6-pack home and drinking it. And, that sounds pretty sad. And the other thing is people are going through tremendous problems right now, the life-changing events. And the last thing that they want to hear is a sales pitch. So here's an epic fail that Miller Lite did, and then I'll show you how they recovered. The first thing that they did was they were running a campaign that, as this started with social distancing and sheltering in place, which was, here's to the original social media. It's actually a brilliant campaign if it wasn't for coronavirus, because that really is the first social media. People who connected and partied and socialized with friends, and beer was always a part of the scene. Well, again, a campaign that was running, and they didn't pull it when we started sheltering in place, and they were absolutely skewered on social media for being completely tone deaf. Number one, they showed groups of people together we're not supposed to be together. Number two, they show them partying. Most of the people I know haven't really felt much like celebrating anything. It just was very tone deaf. So they finally pulled the ad, and they went away for a while, but when they came back, it was genius. They came back with the virtual tip jar. And the virtual tip jar was a campaign that says taps are off, but tips are needed. And they showed nothing but closed bars and closed restaurants. And if you're a bartender, not only is that a modest living in the first place, but you rely heavily on tips. So they replaced it with this tip jar, the virtual tip jar, and they kicked it off with a $1 million donation to the Bartender Emergency Assistance Program, which actually doles out money to bartenders because their lives have completely stopped at this point. And so this is a case of being first tone deaf and then coming back and finding a reason to be here. This is in the section of, do you have a reason to be here? Well, again, not so much from get a six pack and drink it at home, but we're helping the people who have served our beer for a living make a living right now with the virtual tip jar. And it is about adapting a message if you're marketing in any way. The key is to be relevant. And there's small ways that people can be relevant. A local HVAC and plumbing company is offering a discount on furnace checks and touchless plumbing features. And they're positioning it as it's a great way to prevent the spread of viruses in your home. Now, obviously, they're still trying to sell, plumbing fixtures and furnace checks, but there's relevance here. I mean, it actually makes sense. And you have to be helpful. Again, helping beats selling. Steve Madden, which is footwear, is actually marketing their sandals right now. And one might think like, well, does anybody really need new footwear? Well, maybe I do. But what if I'm on unemployment? What if I'm out of a job? Well, I need these sandals, and for the first time ever, Steve Madden is offering 4 interest-free payments. They have never done this before, to bring the cost of that shoe down to $7 a month, $9 a month, whatever it is. They're selling their footwear, but they've adapted their message to be helpful. U-Haul is offering college students 30 days of free storage. It's right here on their website. And again, and I know that after 30 days of free storage, many people will actually stay with U-Haul and they will pick up some new customers. But they're helping, because we all saw the footage of kids who have been, were given 24 hours to evacuate the dorms. And where do you put all your stuff when you have to get out of the dorms that fast? U-Haul stepped in to help. So how do you connect with your customers and your clients in a time of crisis? I mean, I've had this question asked a lot, is like, I don't even know what to say. So be mindful of your approach. Don't contact customers and say, how's it going? Because for most people, it's not going all that well. A better approach, it's akin to saying, so Abe, aside from the gunshot, how was the show? So a better approach is to approach your customers and your clients with trust, with authenticity, positive intent, friendship, and an open mind. I've had many clients say, who are in sales, they're saying that their sales force are actually in daily or weekly contact with their customers. And what they're finding is a lot of their customers just want to talk. They just want to talk. And that friendship is an important thing at this time. I think the other thing that you can do is to be quietly helpful. And by that, I mean, it's not about selling. It's about understanding that people might need something that you can provide and being quietly helpful. So an example is, a friend of mine is a mid-sized electrical distributor in Cincinnati. They sell electrical things to contractors who are building buildings. And so their clients are contractors. Well, in Cincinnati, during the entire month of April, construction projects had to be shut down. No one was allowed to be on a job site in Cincinnati. No one. So everything was shut down. There's nothing to sell to a contractor if he can't work. So they instructed all of their salespeople to continue talking to the contractors who are now sitting at home. And their approach was, how can we help you to be prepared for the reopening? And what they found was a couple of contractors said to them, I have a job site with hundreds of thousands of dollars of equipment, supplies, and materials that I don't feel I can completely secure for the next month. And I don't want it to be vandalized or stolen. What I could really use is some storage. And because they're an electrical distributor and they have massive warehouses, they were able to provide their customer with storage at a time when they really need that. That's not about selling anything right now. That's about being a good partner and being quietly helpful. But I will tell you that I think if you can come through for anybody like that in a situation like this, no one is ever going to forget an act like that. If you're that contractor, you are never going to forget the person who helped you secure your job site. The other thing I think that's important is everybody's business has taken a hit. Everybody's business has taken a hit in one way or another, whether you're furloughing employees or whether your sales have ground to a halt. But you have to show strength to your customers and clients, even if you have to fake it till you make it. You cannot deteriorate in front of your customers. They need you now more than ever before. So you have to show that you're there, and they should not notice an interruption in your service. You should always see the way that you've done business with them. And what that might mean for some companies is that they can't cut as deeply as they want to cut in certain areas. Every company that I know of is making cuts right now, whether it's furloughing employees, cutting product, cutting production. For crying out loud, the automotive industry, they stopped manufacturing cars in April. So cuts are important, but try to make those cuts where they are invisible to your customers, because you really need at this point to be able to instill confidence in your customers. And that means letting them have the means to cope with a situation, furnishing the right information, or going above and beyond to help them if you can. And being empathetic and prioritizing that customer experience. Again, like my friend who offered the storage for the contractors on job sites, that has nothing really to do with his business and just everything to do with like, I got your back. And the other thing that is happening is because everybody is working with shrinking budgets, shrinking staff, mistakes happen in the best of times. I mean, I make mistakes, you make mistakes, it's business, things happen. But mistakes are happening now because everybody is trying to pivot as fast as they can to something new. They're doing the best they can. They don't have the resources that they normally have. Everybody's working from home. I mean, it's just incredibly challenging, and mistakes are going to happen. And what your customers or clients want to hear from you when there's a problem, they only want to hear 5 words. They want to hear about the solution, not an excuse or an explanation. They don't really care why something happened. They just don't care. They want to hear 5 words, and those 5 words are, we'll take care of it. So one of the things that you can do that doesn't cost a dime is, as you're going through this process with all the people that you work with, if there's a problem, and you can teach your people to say this too, is just cut to the chase and say, we dropped the ball, we'll take care of it. Everything else is either an excuse or an explanation, and nobody really has time for that, and nobody really cares. So I want to just leave you with my favorite quote of all time, and that is, if you're going through hell, keep going. And that's Winston Churchill. So I hope that was helpful, and that's all I've got.
Wow, thank you, Kelly. Thank you. That was great. What I when you talk about pivoting and making sure you're continuing to provide the services and all that, I have an amazing team behind the scenes at the chamber, and we were probably the first chamber in Colorado Springs when all this happened in March to pivot immediately. Yeah. And we did that virtually, and we learned. I mean, we practiced ahead of time how to use these new digital platforms and all of that kind of stuff, and we're learning to do that. And our business model is really different now, and we have to figure out how we're going to be very innovative and creative, because the way the chamber works, as we were talking earlier with Dr. Bill and Stacy, who serves on our board of directors, is we have educational events, luncheons, award ceremonies, all of these kinds of stuff, and now that makes up a lot of our business. How do we change that now? So right. I appreciate all your comments. I think that was great. At this point, what I'd like to do is we'd like to take some questions for our speakers. The chat room is available down at the bottom, and Tiffany will read off any questions that, that you might have for our speakers. And I also want to say that I normally stay on the end of these town calls at 5 o'clock, and I do this for a reason, is for those people who are on this call that have any concerns or need any resources from the chamber. We are here to help in any which way we can. And I stay on to do simple conversations, one-on-one, redirect our members to resources and answer any questions that they might have during this time. So I'll stay on after 5, but in the meantime, let's take some questions for our amazing speakers today.
All right, so we have one question from Nancy so far. Her question is for the Centura Health people. She's a massage therapist, a sole practitioner. She asked, do you as doctors feel that it is safe to get a massage at this point?
Interesting question, and I had not been thinking about that. I think using the proper precautions, it is. I think it would be wise for the person performing the massage to make sure that the customers coming in haven't had any of the concerning symptoms for at least 10 days for that, and then to make sure that people are wearing the mask and performing hand hygiene with that. But otherwise, I think that's very reasonable.
And probably taking temps as they come in for their appointments.
Yeah, that's a very good idea. Anyone coming into the hospital or in any of the clinics, we're taking their temperature, and anyone over 100.0, we're just rescheduling.
Great. Any other questions that we have?
Oh, there's one.
Yeah, this one's from Angela. I've had child care providers asking where to get tested if you are not showing symptoms.
So for someone without symptoms, I know LabCorp is one place that is offering testing, and you can get that through a prescription through your physician, primary care provider for that.
Can I ask a dumb question?
There's no dumb questions.
Well, this one might be kind of tough. Do we need to get tested if we're not showing symptoms? I know about asymptomatic and stuff, but do we need to get tested?
I would actually say no. The quality of the testing goes down significantly if someone is not having symptoms. And then the question is, what are you going to do with those results? So if you're asymptomatic and you haven't had a recent exposure where it would make more sense to get tested just to see whether or not there's been contact and some spread. But if you haven't had exposure, most of us have been staying in our homes, everything else, we shouldn't have been exposed. If we're not having symptoms, I wouldn't recommend it at all.
Thank you.
So Vicky asks, any truth to the rumor that blood type is an issue as to whether or not you have a higher susceptibility to COVID-19?
I haven't heard that. And there are a lot of concerns why someone would be more symptomatic or more susceptible. But for the most part, the virus focuses on a very specific receptor, the ACE receptor, that is associated with hypertension, heart disease, congestive heart failure. But I haven't heard it related to blood type.
Okay. And then S. Presti asks, would you address the accuracy and usefulness of antibody testing?
Yeah, the antibody testing, we were talking about that a little bit earlier. There's great promise with that, but there are a lot of different tests that haven't really gone through the proper evaluation yet. Currently in the state, I'm not aware of one that we would recommend. The sensitivity is still quite low. And then the other question about it is, how are you going to interpret those tests? What do you do with that? So I think we've all heard reports from Stanford and Los Angeles where people did antibody testing just to see what is the prevalence in our community. And that might give a good sense of it. But whether or not those antibodies that were tested confer immunity, that means that you're safer, you might change your practices. That's not shown by those tests. So there's still a lot of work in regard to those issues to make sure that not only is the test sensitive, so when you get a positive or when you get a negative test, you can be assured that you have not had exposure, or if you have a positive one, that's a true positive, and that there's meaning behind that to help inform your decisions.
So we have another question from Debbie. What are your opinions of wearing a mask in public, especially if they don't really protect you, and some say they actually make the wearer sick?
They don't make the wearer sick, with the exception that potentially if someone had underlying lung disease and they were just struggling a little harder to get air, no one likes the mask. They're uncomfortable and the like. I do think the whole approach in the messaging has missed sort of the point. Everyone wants to do the right thing and not spread to someone else. And it is true, the cloth mask protects the person that you are around. But I think people would be much more interested in wearing the mask if they were also protected themselves. And so I think as a society, we will get there with better masks. That right now we're having to divert to healthcare environments to really help the people who are at highest risk taking care of the patients. In general, yes, I do think it's wise to wear it out in public. But if you're not around someone that you're not part of your household, my wife and I walk our dogs every night. We're not wearing masks. We talk to neighbors who we meet, but typically we're on the other sides of the street, if anything, just to keep the dogs apart. And over the weekend, went to some nurseries. Everyone was wearing masks, but no one seemed sick or anything. So I think we'll learn over time how to, open our businesses, open society in smarter ways, where right now I think some is providing extra reassurance to everyone that we really are taking all the precautions necessary. It's safe to get back out there. And if anything, I think that's one of the biggest roles of the mask. The main point of protecting, and one of the most important things we do need to do, is the hand hygiene. The virus is much harder to spread than I think most people realize. And it's much more like the flu, where yes, it is possible you could catch it through the air. But when we look at environments where you would expect, if that were the case, a lot of people get infected, they're not. So it's mainly from touching surfaces that then you touch your face or do something else. So in your businesses and the like, one of the smartest things you can do is make sure you have hand sanitizers readily available for people. And I think people would really appreciate that.
I have a question. What do you anticipate the end of this year looking like? When it comes to an organization like ourselves, we're at this point where, okay, we have a major event, which I don't think I could have 630 people at the Antlers Hotel. We only can congregate right now this month 10 in a space. Restaurants are having a 25% capacity only operations. How do you see that changing? Do you see that changing rapidly or not rapidly towards the end of this year and as we go into summer and the fall?
I honestly don't know. And I think there are two things at play. One are what is wise from a healthcare perspective to decrease the risk of transmitting, the virus. For us in a community with very low prevalence, one would think that we could be opening up maybe a little bit faster as long as we are very, still conscious of wearing the mask, hand hygiene, and doing, those proper protective things. Unfortunately, across the country. I think there's also a lot of political, aspects to things that I really can't predict. And unless we all get on the same page, I think there's going to be a lot of push-pull and tension that will slow things up more than necessary. From the virus perspective, though, there's a lot of concern. Will there be another surge? Will we see more cases? Well, we will see more cases because we're testing more. But will we be in a worse place and have to shut things down? And I don't expect that. And I would hope that we would respond more wisely now that we know so much more and are so much better prepared than we were 2 months ago when everything started. And we really didn't know exactly what we were dealing with. But we know much better how it's transmitted. The personal protective equipment that's been so vital, and in places like Colorado, not so readily at hand because so much of the equipment was properly diverted to New York and places harder hit, that we are better supplied now. And we also have the tests that are coming back more quickly rather than having to use them.
Hold on. Did we lose you?
I think we lost his audio.
Lost his audio?
I think so.
Can we get you back, Bill? Are you there?
Did you mute yourself, Bill?
No, his audio actually totally disappeared. Did you guys lose it on the phone? Oh, it might be
He's
back
muted.
soon.
Unmute yourself.
Okay,
Yep.
sorry.
There you
There you go.
We were hanging up on an incoming call.
go.
So sorry about that. But we're much better prepared. Test results are now coming back same day or next day rather than 14 days. And we've also learned so much better about how to treat people with the severest of the disease. Where in the beginning of this, the mantra was intubate early, treat someone just as if they had the most severe form of lung injury with high pressures to keep the lungs open. And we quickly realized that was not the best approach. And we treat people very differently and have seen marked improvement. And here in Colorado Springs, I think we're really on the forefront of that, just because we have some very experienced doctors who recognize this needs to be handled differently. So I'm very hopeful for our future.
Great. Well, I want to thank Penrose and Centura for being on the front lines, but more importantly, the amazing group of nurses that have traveled to the East Coast to help our family and friends out there and donating that time. What an amazing group, Stacy. Really, honestly.
Yeah. Within Centura, we had 34 nurses that went to New Jersey to some of our Catholic hospitals there. 27 of them came from Penrose St. Francis, mostly critical care and ED nurses, and they've been there for 3 weeks and actually coming home next week.
Yeah.
So they experienced some things that we did not experience here in Colorado. So they're going to need a lot of support for what they saw, moral distress, making decisions that luckily here in Colorado, we didn't see. And so I'm very proud of the nursing staff that went, and they deserve a lot of recognition for what they did.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Now, Kelly, I want to go back to you. Being an international speaker, you're used to being in rooms of thousands of people. So what are you hearing on the circuit of all these conferences and conventions and all that? And maybe you have an insight on what's happening.
I don't know if you're going to want to hear it.
Probably don't.
So I have been talking extensively to speakers bureaus, meeting planners. So I'll just share, if I may, what in my world, I had 36 engagements already on the books for this year as of the second week of February. So that was putting me on pace to do about 80 to 90 engagements this year. And obviously that's not happening. So everything initially in March, April, and early May canceled. Then we got to early May and everything in June canceled. Yesterday we had 2 engagements. I have 9 booked for August. Yesterday we had 2 engagements in August that canceled. And just let me clarify, when I say canceled, they canceled their conference. I get rebooked. They're rebooking me either for later this year or for early next. So my income is intact, but just deferred for a long time. But what we're seeing is, I had a big conference in March, like 1,500 people, and it got moved to June. And then in June, then they moved it to August. And so what I'm experiencing personally is things aren't getting better fast enough for meeting planners who are dealing with large conferences to feel confident that they can go forward with planning their conference. And it's for 2 reasons. One is, can they actually make the logistics work? I was on the phone with the Speakers Bureau the other day, who is the preferred Speakers Bureau for the American Society of Association Executives, right? So this is just nothing but associations. And they said that they were on the phone with their client, and they said, let's break this down step by step. Let's imagine how all this works if we have to continue to do social distancing. Let's say we're not sheltering at home anymore, but we have to do social distancing. So they started with registration, and they said, what does the registration table look like? How do we keep people 6 feet apart? Are we giving masks and gloves to people at registration along with their badge? And then let's talk about the breakfast. Do we serve breakfast? Who wants to go have breakfast if they can't sit next to someone? And so, I mean, it just kind of went from there. And then it was like, and what about the keynote speaker? Do we have a keynote speaker? If we have a keynote speaker, do we have to take the first 3 rows in the auditorium and keep them blank with no people so that no one gets close to the speaker or this, I mean, they just started kind of going through the logistics, and they were very concerned that logistically, even if people were like, yes, I want to go, I'm dying to go, that they could actually pull it off. And then one of the other executives on the call said, and even if the employee from a company, let's say, wants to go, is that employer going to let them, and are they going to pay for them to go? Because that's who pays for people to go to conferences, is the employer. And if they feel like they're putting their people at risk, or to go to the dark side here, God forbid they're going to get sued because they put their employee at risk because they sent them to a conference. So it's very complex, Lola. Here's my forecast based on all of that. And I'm not trying to be Betty Buzzkill. I'm just trying to be real, because it's a massive effect on my business too. Is I think we're going to be home for the rest of this year. And I do think that in 2021, even in first quarter, people are going to try to have conferences. So I just don't know that it's going to come back in time this year for meeting planners such as yourself holding big events, for them to be able to make the call when they need to make the call. In other words, for you to decide if you're going to have your event in October, you really need to make those decisions by like July, definitively. And I just don't know that we're going to be that much further down this road in 60 days than we are now. There's also some predictions of a COVID hangover, where even when the government says, yes, you can go out, you're free, you don't have to wear a mask anymore, that people are going to be a little gun shy. I'm going to be the first one out the door. I'm going to be the first one out the door. I'm going to be the first one on a plane. I'm way too extroverted to stay at home like this. But, my business manager she's going to be in the 3rd wave. She's like much more cautious, and she will not be comfortable. So I think we're going to be living this for a while. And I'm very hopeful that next year is a different year. And I really hope that every single thing I'm telling you is wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But just from what I'm seeing with my August starting to cancel, and my meeting planners are just telling me, like, we don't have confidence that we're going to have the ability to pull it off or the attendance. Now, the good news is, and here is a little bit of good news. I was talking to a client the other day who has never done a virtual conference ever, and they flipped to a virtual conference this year. And even though the cost of that conference, I mean, in terms of what they charge their members or attendees to go, is way, way less than somebody going to a conference. And this is how they make their money. So they were very concerned about that. And as it turned out, she said the cost was significantly lower, but our attendance skyrocketed. And I said, really? And she said, yes, for a couple of reasons. Number one, we're all staying at home, so we're like a little starved for human contact. And number two, companies that couldn't afford to send an employee to a conference in the past because of, it's travel, it's lodging, it's the whole thing, they could send an employee to a virtual conference that was a fraction. So she said the cost was lower, but the attendance was higher, and she actually made the same kind of money. And obviously had none of the expenses. I mean, there's no food and bev, there's no entertainment, So I think you've got to keep your finger on the pulse, Lola, of what is going on, and keep talking to people like this, and keep talking to people in the industry, and find out, canvas the speakers that you work with, the meeting planners that you work with, the suppliers and hotels that you work with, what are they hearing, and try to piece it all together and make the best decisions that you can. But that's what I'm hearing.
Well, you confirmed everything I've been somewhat hearing too. We've been very tight with all of our venues here in Colorado Springs, and they're kind of seeing the same thing happening. We've already pulled the trigger about a month ago. Of course, it was a little convincing with everybody else to make sure everybody was on board that we're going to have to do accolades in a different format this year. We're very aware of that, so we're planning for that. And it's going to be like no other accolades before. Actually, I had a very productive call this morning with the entire team, and I'm really excited. It's going to be very, very different, but it's going to be the right thing to do. And, Tamara and Debbie Swanson, Debbie's on the call, they're both the committee chairs of programs. And doing these town halls and every programming that we've done virtually, I will tell you, we've done polls, and even if we are able to open up, the people on our polls on every single virtual thing that we've done are coming back and saying, we're asking those polls. We should have put one up today, but Tamara would have had that up today if she was handling all this. We're asking them, what's your comfort level even when we open up? And
Right.
Surprisingly, we're getting like 36% on our polls, people not even ready to go into that.
Right. And on a national statistical framework, Lola, I've actually seen studies that show that the numbers are even higher for people who say, I'm gonna start living my life again, but like in little bits. There was actually you can check this out online, or you can follow me on LinkedIn. I posted it a week ago. The IFEA, International Festivals and Events Association. So by festivals and events, this is everything from concerts like Lollapalooza to a wine tasting festival. I mean, you name it, right? But any kind of event or festival internationally. And they put out a comprehensive report, a study that they had done of asking people, when are you going to want to go out? What exactly do you expect from an event or whatever? And talking about people's mindsets. And they were saying things like, it's not going to be that fun for me to go to the event if everybody's going to be wearing a mask and nobody's going to be able to do anything. And so, these are very tied together, and it was very encouraging, but at the same time, it was like a big dose of reality. And so, I think people are going to be very cautious, and I'm going to be the first one out the door, and I'm not going to have anybody to play with outside because no one else is going to be out there with me. But all right, Jane, I'll meet you in the park. I'm going nuts. And my husband's like, don't you have some errands to run? And I'm like, where would I? Oh, I can go to King Soopers again, I'm just like, we've never had this much togetherness in 3 decades. So it's tough. I will tell you too that the other thing I'm hearing about virtual conferences is a lot of meeting planners are very nervous about it. They've never done it before. This is just a whole new ballgame. And what they're finding is that their audiences are so with them. Like everybody understands technical glitches. Everybody's understanding that everyone is doing the best they can right now under pretty extreme circumstances. And so I'm not saying you don't want to put on a heck of a show, for your attendees, but people are really it's that whole, it takes a village. People are really pulling together, and they're realizing that companies and organizations like chambers and stuff are doing the best darn, they can. And they're very supportive of your efforts, and they're like, this was great. They're not sitting there going, oh, well, that didn't go that smoothly. I mean, I was on a webcast with 1,000 people, hosted by Chubb today, and they had technical problems, and it wasn't them, it was the platform. I mean, they actually said that they got an alert that said platform degrading.
Oh no.
and like all the feedback from everyone after the webcast was, that was awesome. I mean, people understand. They get it. So I hope that helps.
No, I think that does. If anybody wants, if you feel more comfortable on muting yourself and you have a question for our speakers or Kelly, please do so.
Well, I see Stacy just made a comment that doing a virtual conference for the next 3 days, and it's done very, very well. Stacy, I mean, that's like, what have you heard, Stacy? You've got a great conference going.
Yeah, so there was a speaker actually that came to the chamber luncheon, Tommy Wolf, and she talked about EOS and traction. I had never heard about it, picked it up, and have run with it. And this is their annual conference. Normally, the conference is about $1,700. They reduced the price to under $1,000 per person. And I was trying to guesstimate how many people were there, and I counted 57 people with the last name that started with A. And then, my lack of detail said, I think I'll just multiply that by 26 letters and get an average. But
Right.
They've done a great job. There's been technical difficulties for sure. And I'll see that in the chat that people are having those difficulties. But like you said, I think people just kind of understand that's the way it is. The way they've run the platform to make it as similar as you would if you were there. Like some people in the chat say, hey, I'm on the third row, and things like that. Like they're trying to text you, their friend, where to sit. And so it's been really interesting to see the platform roll out. And then at the end of the day, they had a mixer, and they had you in groups by your level of expertise, so that you were in a group with people and a moderator that was somewhere ahead of you. And so they've done some innovative things there. And even they don't have an exhibit hall.
Right.
How are their sponsors floating that? And they're doing a great job with it. So I can give you more information. Feel free to contact me.
Great.
Everybody's pulling together to get it done.
I'd like to ask our speakers, if you have your presentation and you want to drop it in the chat box for people to share, that's fine. Kelly, if you've got something going on, I know you're doing some things off of your website that, the information was great. I mean, we talk about the messaging that we forget in times like this. We can't ignore that deafening messaging, and it's really important. And as we look at accolades, as you were at our biggest event with 630 people last year as a keynote speaker, we're kind of revisiting that. Is everybody in that frame of mind of celebration and awards? This is going to be something really different and unique, the way we're going to approach it going forward.
And I think one of the things that you can do, Lola, is, and I don't mean this like you, but all of us, is to not try to guess what your attendees want. I would ask them. Mm-hmm. And I find that if you ask people, they'll tell you. And so let's say you're talking to some of your members and you say, do you want to do the awards? I mean, what do you, and they might say, no, let's actually use those. I'm making this up. Let's actually use those awards to recognize our healthcare workers. Or, I'm just saying, like, I think everything is on the table, and anything that your attendees and your members want to do, that you should take a hard look at that, and you should ask and see if they have any ideas.
Great suggestions, Kelly. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else with any questions? I know I could take one more question. We're just getting ready to close up our town hall for today, but does anybody have any other questions?
Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Clark. Stacy, thank you. And thank
Our pleasure.
It was our pleasure.
Thank you so much. We appreciate everything that you guys are doing and appreciate you doing this public service for our members in the community. We're all in this together. We're going to get through it, right?
Yes,
We
we
are.
will.
When you're going through hell, keep going.
Keep going. I love it. When you're going through hell, keep going.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
I'll stay on the line in case anybody wants to chat with me or has any questions. I'll be more than happy to stay on.
Okay.
Hey, Kelly,
Bye.
I'm going to reach out to you soon, okay?
Sounds good. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Lola.
Hello, Tiffany, you could end the recording.
I shall do that.
Yeah.